At a family dinner, my niece tried to embarrass me for not lending her money. She smirked and said, "Family helps each other." I stood up, pulled out my phone, and said, "Then explain this." Her face went pale when she saw this. I, 42M, never thought a simple family dinner would turn into the most satisfying moment of revenge I'd ever experienced. But sometimes life has a twisted sense of justice, and my entitled niece learned that lesson the hard way. It started 3 months ago when my niece, who's 24 and fresh out of college, approached me at my brother's birthday party. She pulled me aside with that fake sweet smile she'd perfected over the years and asked if I could lend her $15,000 for a down payment on a car. She explained how she'd just landed her first job and needed reliable transportation, how her parents were already helping her with rent, and how she'd pay me back within 6 months. I'm not wealthy by any means, but I work in IT and have managed to save decent money over the years. Still, 15 grand isn't pocket change, and something about her approach felt off. I told her I needed to think about it, which clearly wasn't the answer she expected. Her smile faltered for just a second before she recovered and said she understood. Over the next few weeks, she kept bringing it up at family gatherings. Casual mentions about how hard it was to get to work without a car, pointed comments about how some family members were more generous than others, and increasingly frustrated sighs when I didn't bite. My brother and sister-in-law started giving me looks, the kind that suggested I was being unreasonable for not helping their precious daughter. Then I started noticing things. At my nephew's graduation party, she showed up wearing designer shoes that cost more than some people's monthly rent. The following week at a family barbecue, she was flashing a new iPhone and complaining about how expensive the case was. When I asked about her job, she mentioned she'd been going out with coworkers almost every night, hitting expensive restaurants and bars downtown. Something didn't add up. Someone who needed to borrow $15,000 for basic transportation was spending money like water on luxury items. I decided to do a little investigating. It wasn't hard to find her social media accounts. Despite her privacy settings, mutual friends meant I could see plenty. The photos told a story she clearly didn't want the family to know. Pictures from high-end restaurants with captions about celebrating her latest commission. Screenshots of shopping sprees with hashtags about treating herself. Photos from a weekend trip to a ski resort that would have cost thousands. But the real kicker was a video from 2 weeks ago. She was at a car dealership, posing next to a brand new luxury sedan, talking about how excited she was to finally make the purchase. The caption read something about working hard and rewarding herself with her dream car. She already had a car. She'd bought it herself, and she was still asking me for money. I screenshot everything, saved the video, and compiled a nice little folder of evidence. Then I waited. The opportunity came at my parents' anniversary dinner. The whole family was there, cramped around the dining room table that had seen decades of celebrations. My niece had been particularly persistent lately, mentioning the car situation to anyone who would listen and making increasingly pointed comments about family loyalty and helping each other out. Dinner was going normally until dessert was served. That's when she decided to make her move. She started talking about how grateful she was for family, how important it was for people to support each other, and how she'd learned so much about who she could really count on recently. The conversation naturally turned to her transportation struggles, and she launched into her well-rehearsed sob story about needing reliable transportation for work. My mother, bless her heart, suggested that maybe someone in the family could help out. My father nodded along, mentioning how they'd helped all the kids over the years when they needed it. My brother chimed in about how proud they were of their daughter for being so responsible and working so hard. Then my niece turned to me with that smirk I'd grown to hate. She said how she understood that not everyone could help, but she'd always believed that family should support each other when they could. She mentioned how she'd asked me for help months ago and was still hoping I might reconsider, especially since she'd proven how responsible she was with money. The whole table was looking at me now. I could feel the judgment, the expectation that I'd finally step up and be the good uncle everyone wanted me to be. My sister-in-law made a comment about how $15,000 wasn't that much money for someone in my position, and how it would mean everything to a young person just starting out. My niece leaned back in her chair with that satisfied smile, clearly thinking she'd cornered me into helping. She made one final comment about how family helps each other, and how she'd never forget who was there for her when she really needed it. That's when I stood up and pulled out my phone. I told the table that she was absolutely right about family helping each other, and that I'd learned a lot about family loyalty recently too. I said I had something interesting to show everyone that might help them understand the situation better. The first thing I showed them was the video of her at the dealership. I held my phone up so everyone could see her celebrating her new car purchase, talking about how she'd worked hard and saved up for her dream vehicle. The audio was clear, her excitement genuine, and the timestamp showed it was from 2 weeks ago. Her face went completely white. She started stammering about how that wasn't what it looked like, how she was just looking at cars and dreaming, but I wasn't done. I swiped to the next screenshot, showing her social media post from 3 days ago with the car keys and a caption about loving her new ride. Then another photo of her in the driver's seat with a post about finally having reliable transportation. The silence around the table was deafening. My parents looked confused, my brother looked angry, and my sister-in-law looked like she wanted to disappear. But my niece looked absolutely mortified. I explained to everyone that she'd been asking me for money for a car down payment, while she already owned the exact car she claimed to need. I showed them the photos of her expensive dinners, shopping sprees, and weekend trips, all posted while she was telling the family how financially struggling she was. My brother asked her directly if she already had a car, and she couldn't deny it anymore. She admitted she'd bought it 2 months ago, but claimed she needed the money to pay off the loan. When my father asked why she hadn't just said that from the beginning, she broke down and admitted she'd been living beyond her means and wanted the money to catch up on credit card debt she'd racked up. The revelation hit the family like a bomb. Not only had she lied about needing transportation, but she'd been manipulating everyone's emotions to fund her irresponsible spending habits. She'd been painting me as the selfish uncle who wouldn't help family while secretly living a lifestyle she couldn't afford. My mother asked how much debt she was actually in, and the number she finally admitted to was staggering. She owed more than $30,000 across multiple cards, had been making minimum payments, and was using new credit to pay old bills. The $15,000 she wanted from me wouldn't have even put a dent in her real problems. My brother was furious. He and his wife had been enabling her spending, thinking they were helping her transition to independence, while she'd been spinning lies to get money from other family members too. It turned out she'd already borrowed $5,000 from my cousin and had been hinting around to my aunt about needing help with rent. The dinner ended awkwardly, with my niece leaving in tears and my brother apologizing profusely for his daughter's behavior. But the story doesn't end there. Update 1. 3 days after the dinner, my brother called me. He wanted to apologize again and explain what had been happening behind the scenes. Apparently, the car situation was even worse than we'd realized during dinner. She hadn't just bought one car. She'd traded up twice in the past 6 months, each time rolling negative equity into a bigger loan. The luxury sedan she was so proud of came with a monthly payment that was nearly half her take-home income. She'd convinced her parents to co-sign by telling them it was a reliable used car with low payments. But the reality was she'd wanted the status symbol and talked herself into payments she couldn't afford. My brother and sister-in-law had been covering her insurance, phone bill, and groceries while she spent her entire paycheck on car payments, credit card minimums, and maintaining her social media lifestyle. They'd been planning to gradually reduce their support as she got more established, but now they realized she'd been using their help to subsidize her reckless spending. They'd also discovered she'd been lying about her job situation. She wasn't struggling to get to work because she lacked transportation. She'd been calling in sick frequently to avoid facing the reality of her financial situation. Her attendance was so poor that her employer had put her on probation, which explained why she was so desperate for money. Update 2. A week later, my cousin reached out with an interesting development. Remember the $5,000 she'd already borrowed? Turns out that was supposed to be for emergency dental work that her parents' insurance wouldn't cover. She'd shown him fake estimates from a dental office and everything. The money had actually gone toward a vacation with friends and shopping sprees. My cousin was understandably angry and wanted his money back, but she claimed she couldn't pay him because she'd already spent it. When he threatened to tell her parents about the lies, she broke down and admitted the dental emergency was completely fabricated. This revelation prompted my brother to do some digging into her other financial claims. The rent assistance they'd been providing? She was actually living in a more expensive apartment than they knew about, and their money was covering the difference between what she told them she was paying and the actual rent. The groceries they were buying her? She'd been selling some of them to co-workers to get cash for entertainment expenses. The web of lies was extensive and systematic. She'd been running essentially a small-scale con game on her own family, using their love and concern to fund a lifestyle she couldn't afford while playing the victim when anyone questioned her requests for help. Update 3. 2 weeks after the dinner, the consequences really started hitting her. Her parents cut off all financial support and demanded she move to a cheaper apartment within 30 days. They also insisted she return the car and get something with payments she could actually afford, which meant admitting to the dealer that she'd lied about her income and dealing with being upside down on the loan. My cousin filed a small claims court case to recover his $5,000, providing evidence of the fake dental estimates and her admission that the emergency was fabricated. The court date was set for the following month, but the threat of legal action seemed to wake her up to the seriousness of her situation. She tried reaching out to other family members for help, but word had spread about what happened at the dinner. My aunt confronted her about the rent money hints, and she admitted she'd been planning to ask for $10,000 using another sob story about unexpected medical expenses. The most interesting development came when she finally agreed to meet with the financial counselor her parents insisted on. The counselor's assessment was brutal but necessary. Her debt-to-income ratio was unsustainable, her spending patterns showed no awareness of financial reality, and she'd been using credit like free money without understanding the long-term consequences. The counselor recommended she consider bankruptcy, but first suggested she try to negotiate payment plans with creditors and drastically reduce her expenses. This meant giving up the luxury apartment, returning the expensive car, and eliminating all non-essential spending for at least 2 years. Final update. A month later, my niece finally faced the full scope of her financial reality. She'd moved back in with her parents temporarily while looking for a cheaper place to live. The luxury car was gone, replaced with a reliable used vehicle her father helped her find with payments she could actually manage. Her parents had taken control of her finances temporarily, giving her a weekly allowance for essentials while every other penny went toward debt repayment. She'd also started seeing a therapist to address what the financial counselor identified as compulsive spending behaviors and issues with impulse control. My cousin got his money back through a payment plan her parents supervised, though it took several months. She'd also paid back the money her parents had unknowingly contributed to her lifestyle lies, though that would take much longer to fully resolve. The most significant change was in family dynamics. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild, and several family members remained skeptical of her claims about anything. Holiday gatherings were awkward for a while, with everyone walking on eggshells around financial topics. But there was a silver lining. The shock of being exposed so publicly seemed to genuinely wake her up to the consequences of her choices. 6 months later, she was consistently making payments, had found a second job to accelerate debt repayment, and was actually sticking to the budget her parents had helped her create. She eventually apologized to me privately, admitting she'd planned the dinner confrontation to pressure me into lending her money she knew she couldn't repay. She said she'd convinced herself that if she could just get enough money to catch up on bills, she could start fresh and handle things responsibly going forward. Looking back, I'm glad I trusted my instincts and did the research before handing over $15,000 I might never have seen again. But more importantly, the public exposure forced her to confront problems she'd been avoiding and ultimately led to getting the help she actually needed. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for family isn't giving them what they ask for, but refusing to enable behavior that's ultimately destructive. My niece learned that lesson the hard way, but she did learn it. The family dinner confrontation became a turning point not just for her, but for all of us in understanding the difference between helping someone and enabling them. And while it took time, we eventually rebuilt relationships based on honesty rather than manipulation.